Alright, gearheads, buckle up, we're back at it again at CineBuster. Today we're shifting the transmission into a completely different gear and continent. We're heading to Tokyo, the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift 2006, the movie the studio almost released straight to video, the movie that introduced an entire generation to drifting, to drift racing, to Han, and to a fleet of cars so wild they deserve their own documentary. And that's basically what we're making today. If you're new here and you love movie cars and film history, hit subscribe to CineBuster right now and come along for the ride. We're heading into the pits, and I have a bonus car at the end, so keep watching. First car on the grid, the one that starts it all. Before there's any drifting, before there's Tokyo, before there's Han, there's Sean Boswell in a 1971 Chevrolet Monte Carlo in Oro Valley, Arizona, about to race a guy's Dodge Viper for his girlfriend. And, well, spoiler, the Monte Carlo does not walk away from that race in one piece. It walks away in 0 pieces, scattered across a construction site. 11 Monte Carlos were built for production because when you're planning to flip a car through a half-built house and into the side of a construction yard, you want spares. Of those 11, 2 of the cars featured engines reportedly producing as much as 800 horsepower. The Monte Carlo was chosen deliberately. Sean was written as a low-income kid, the underdog, someone who built something out of nothing. The producers wanted a car that felt blue-collar and tough, and they'd already used the Charger, the Challenger, and the Yenko Camaro. The Monte Carlo was the right fit, American muscle and affordable enough to make the story work. So, where are the surviving cars today? Well, they scattered. One ended up in France, which seems fitting for a car that never made it to Japan on screen. Another was listed on eBay in 2015 with a 6-figure asking price and eventually sold for just over 60 grand. A third was offered in 2019 for right around 40 grand. At least one remains owned by Universal Studios, and according to Craig Lieberman, a technical advisor on the early franchise films, at least a couple more are still out there. The Monte Carlo never gets the love of Han's RX-7 or the Mustang, but it's the car that launched everything. A little respect is due, for that car showed.
It's not the ride, it's the rider.
Now we need to take a moment for the most unhinged vehicle in the entire Fast and Furious franchise. Not the most powerful, not even the most valuable, the most unhinged. Twinkie's 2005 Volkswagen Turon, done up in full Incredible Hulk livery. Green from stem to stern with giant fiberglass Hulk fists punching out of the body panels, and yes, the interior was done in purple fuzz upholstery, because of course it was. Justin Lin and Universal struck a deal with Marvel just to get the rights to display this Hulk-themed van. Everything about this car screams just because. Excuse the mini rant here, but Marvel was gasping for air at that point in the works for their Hail Mary project Iron Man, which would hit theaters in 2008. In hindsight, this van defied all odds of existing. Okay, mini rant over. What's wild is how well this van works as a character beat. Sean Boswell rolls into Tokyo thinking he knows what car culture looks like, when Twinkie pulls up in a literal Hulk minivan and Sean's jaw is on the floor. It's the movie's way of saying you don't know this world yet. The Turon wasn't just a joke vehicle, it hauled tires, tools, and eventually the cash Sean needed to pay off the Yakuza. It was the crew's support van, it was always in the garage, and absolutely should not be as memorable as it is. Here we are. As for where it ended up, the most famous surviving example has been on display at Universal Studios Orlando, parked in the Marvel area between the Incredible Hulk coaster and the Storm Force acceleration ride. Perfect cross-promotion. One other version of the car reportedly made its way to the Volkswagen Museum in Wolfsburg, Germany, which is arguably even funnier. A Hulk minivan from a Fast and Furious movie preserved in the VW Corporate Museum in Germany, right next to the Beatles and the Golfs. That's cinema history meeting automotive history in the strangest possible way. Hey, quick time out before we get to the real crown jewels of this build list. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button and subscribe to CineBuster. We do this for every major Fast and Furious film. And trust us, the best cars are still coming. Back in 5 seconds. Now we get into the heavy hitters, the Drift King's Nissan 350Z, driven by Takashi, played by Brian T. It is painted in a black and silver scheme with aggressive graphics and a Veilside version 3 wide-body kit. Kinda makes it look like it was assembled by people who had a grudge against subtlety. 8 350Zs were built for the film in total. 6 were destroyed during production. 6. 3 of those were right-hand drive cars imported directly from Japan, because the film is set in Tokyo and even Universal's prop department wasn't willing to fake that detail. Only 2 survived. Production was delayed because they couldn't build and replace wrecked cars fast enough. The surviving hero car is the only one of 8 fitted with the full APS twin turbocharged engine, making 430 horsepower, nearly double what the stock 350Z produced at the time. It also has Sparco racing buckets, a Cusco roll cage, Veilside 19-inch wheels, and a non-functioning NOS bottle in the back window. Because every DK car needs a non-functioning nitrous bottle. It's the law. This car was purchased by a private collector directly from Universal Pictures after filming Wrapped. It's appeared for sale at various points, once through a UK dealership at just under £150,000, and again on Auto Trader UK at around $134,000. It shows roughly 11,000 miles on the clock, retains all of its original film bodywork and graphics, and is fully road legal. Whether it's sold most recently or is sitting in a private garage somewhere waiting for the market to peak, we can't say definitively. But this car story isn't over. DK's 350Z is one of the 2 most screen-authentic vehicles from this film that's still drivable, and the market on it keeps climbing. And now the one you've been waiting for, the car that defined an era of JDM tuner culture and became one of the most recognizable movie machines ever built. Hans Mazda RX-7. Orange and black, wrapped in the Veilside Fortune wide-body kit, wearing 19-inch Andrew racing wheels powered by a rebuilt twin-rotor rotary engine. This car is not from a movie. This car is the movie. Multiple RX-7s were used during production, only 2 are confirmed to have survived. One has been in the UK since 2008, acquired by its current owner directly from New Era Imports, the JDM broker who brokered the deal between Veilside and Universal. This particular car was the hero close-up car used for any scene where you see Han in or near the RX-7. It still carries the production marking number 71 Hans on the passenger door, the engine bay, and the dashboard. The scuff marks from camera mounts are still visible. The engine was rebuilt by legendary Japanese tuner Aria Memiya and produces approximately 280 horsepower. The UK owner stored it in dry conditions for nearly 2 decades, rarely drove it, fitted it with a 24/7 GPS tracker, and kept it essentially untouched. Then in July 2025, that car went to auction at Bonham's Cars at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. The pre-sale estimate was £250,000 to £350,000. The hammer fell at just over £900,000, roughly $1.2 million US. $1.2 million for a Mazda RX-7. Yep, you heard that right. The estimate was blown past before most people in the room could process what was happening. It makes this particular car one of the most expensive movie cars ever sold at auction, a number that would have seemed absurd when the film came out in 2006, but makes perfect sense now. Han's car isn't just a film prop, it's a cultural artifact from a very specific moment in automotive history, and the market priced it accordingly. If the RX-7 is the film's soul, the 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback is its thesis statement: American muscle, Japanese heart. The car Sean's father found on the army base, the car they restore, rebuild, and send down a mountain for the final showdown with the Drift King. And under the hood, not the V8 you'd expect, a Nissan Skyline GTR RB26 inline-6, single turbo, mated to a 5-speed manual transmission, backed by a Ford 9-inch rear end. The car is literally built at the intersection of 2 continents, which is exactly the point. The build wasn't straightforward. GTR specialist Sean Morris was brought in as the RB26 expert. When he first saw the car at Tri-C Engineering, they'd already pulled a Skyline engine to try and fit it, and immediately hit clearance issues with the shock towers. Morris had them put that engine back in the donor car, then sourced a separate RB26 block for the Mustang build, fitted with a single Turbonetics 61 turbocharger instead of the factory twin setup. The result, approximately 350 rear-wheel horsepower in the hero car. Edmunds actually tested it and ran a 13.3 at 109 miles per hour in the quarter mile. Impressive for a car built to look cool while sliding sideways, not sprint. Here's the thing the script doesn't tell you clearly. The movie claims the RB26 came from Han's wrecked Nissan Silva S15. But the S15 came from the factory with an SR20 4-cylinder, not an RB26. In the film's universe, it's a twice-swapped engine. which is the franchise's way of papering over the detail. Also worth noting, most of the Mustang stunt cars didn't have RB engines at all. They ran 430-inch Windsor V8s for the actual drift sequences because they were more practical and more powerful for the physical stunt work. The RB26 car was the hero, close-ups only. 6 Mustangs were built for the film. Remarkably, not one of them was destroyed during production. 0. In a film that totaled over 80 vehicles, every single Mustang made it out alive. 5 of the 6 were sold to buyers in Southern California after filming. One V8 stunt car was listed for sale in 2019 with a $179,900 asking price. Others have surfaced at shows, drift events, and F&F fan gatherings over the years. The RB-swapped hero car remains privately owned, and at this point, after the trajectory of the RX-7 at auction, anyone who holds one of these RB-powered Mustangs is sitting on something the market has not finished pricing yet. 10 Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 9s were purchased for this film. 10. And almost all of them were converted from all-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive to make them usable for drift sequences, which is the kind of modification that makes Evo purists lie down in a dark room. Universal spent over $7 million on cars alone for Tokyo Drift. Most bought secondhand since the models needed were already out of production. The Evo was one of the cars that ate a significant chunk of that budget. Now, here's the detail that went largely untold for years until it surfaced at the Peterson Automotive Museum. Before the screen cars were built, Universal used a pre-existing SEMA show car, built by APR as the blueprint for the Evo builds. This car, owned by YouTuber Dustin Williams, was the design and spec reference point the production team worked from. Universal used it in the global promotional tour, sending it to China and Mexico for marketing. Then it went into storage. For 15 years, the car sat untouched. When it was finally unearthed and brought to the Peterson for display, the automotive community lost their minds, and the Peterson put it on showcase. It's now viewable at the museum, and it represents the origin point for one of the most iconic cars in the film. The screen used Evos themselves scattered after production. Most were sold off, and tracking all 10 is a research project in its own right. But the APR blueprint car, that one has a home now. And it's exactly where it belongs, in a museum under a spotlight with the full story attached. We can't close out a Tokyo Drift car breakdown without talking about the vehicle that appears on screen for approximately 90 seconds and somehow changed everything. The 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner, the car Dominic Toretto rolls up in at the very end of the film for his cameo appearance. Here's the behind-the-scenes story. Universal was nervous about this film, really nervous. It had no Vin Diesel, no Paul Walker, no Brian and Dom. Test screenings went well enough, but the studio wanted a safety net, a cameo that tied the film back to the franchise fans already loved. Vin Diesel agreed to appear, but not for money. He traded his cameo in exchange for Universal's rights to the Riddick character, and that might be the most undervalued deal in Hollywood history. The Roadrunner itself was built for SEMA, that's a Specialty Equipment Market Association. It was a show car first, pressed into film duty for the cameo. After filming, it went back into private ownership. Its current location isn't publicly confirmed, but the moment it appears on screen pulling up next to Sean in that S15 Silvia, music dropping. That 30 seconds is worth more to this franchise's continuity than any amount of budget spent on a stunt car. Dom says he won the Roadrunner from Han. Sean says this isn't a 10-second race. Dom says he's got nothing but time. Roll credits, franchise saved. But what about the other Mopar in the film? Yeah, I'm talking about Daddy's Cherry Red Viper from the opening race. Time for the bonus car. From what I pieced together, there were 4 cars from the film, not in the best shape. One was the black one from Too Fast, Too Furious painted red film. I dug up this post about one of the wrecked Vipers. It sat in a warehouse until it was bought by a prop company who put the drivetrain into, wait for it, a Lincoln Continental. And it was offered for sale in 2024. No Borla exhaust on this old gal. This Lincoln had a custom Farida exhaust. I hope that makes Clay's heart drop knowing that. There is a video out there of this gorgeous land yacht. I'll drop it in the description. Now that's a car I'd like to see line up with Sean's Monte Carlo. If you enjoyed this breakdown, do us a solid and like the video and subscribe to CineBuster. We'll see you in the next lane. Stay sideways, stay curious, and as always, we're just getting started.